So you know that feeling when you've worked in the kitchen all day to make this new meal for your family, something nutritious, something delicious, something that takes your time and your energy, and you put it before them and they hate it and they won't eat it. And either you end up eating leftovers over and over and over and over again, or it all ends up going to waste. Please say it's not just me. I found that after we ended up having to switch to gluten-free, it was a whole lot worse. We had staples in our family that my kids would eat and they liked and everyone was happy, and we could eat none of those anymore. Now we had to start from scratch and rebuild this new menu of food, and I would work really hard to make something and my kids would hate it. Try these meal planning strategies and try these new menu things that are supposed to be budget friendly, because gluten-free food is ridiculously more expensive than anything else. And they wouldn't eat it, they wouldn't touch it, and all of that food would go to waste. So I'm starting a new video series on those meals that have become staples for our family, in that they're meals that all four of my kids, even with their different pickiness levels, will eat all of it and none of it goes to waste. And in the hopes that it might help some of you who might be going through similar issues with your family. This one we're going to start with is my super easy, measure with your heart, green chili enchilada casserole. But first, if you're returning, welcome back. If you are new, welcome. My name is Melissa. This channel is dedicated to gluten-free and celiac-safe cooking and baking recipes and tips. Let me know in the comments of any recipe that I should try, and thank you for joining me. One thing that I found is when it comes to gluten-free enchilada sauce, Hatch is probably your best bet. It's one of the only gluten-free sauces that I found that's really budget-friendly. There are others that are gluten-free that taste delicious, but they're ridiculously expensive. The problem with Hatch is that it's not always available in stores. I actually prefer the mild to the medium, but we can only find the medium, so we bought a whole bunch of that. If it's ended up being a meal that you love, then you can buy it in bulk online. It might be worth it. Or you can stock up whenever it comes into the stores in your area. If you can't find it, I did find a good gluten-free enchilada sauce recipe that I'm gonna make a video on later that's really friendly as well.
When it comes to chicken for this recipe, you can pretty much prepare your chicken any way you want. Crock pot, oven, stove, doesn't matter. You can even use leftover rotisserie chicken if you're not as gluten sensitive. You're going to combine that chicken with, after you've kind of cut it up or shredded it up, with half to a full chopped onion, or diced or minced, however small you want your onion pieces to be. Mix it with a can of chopped green chilies and a little bit of your enchilada sauce. And then you can add pinto beans or black beans or corn, however you want to add to your recipe. I have found that my kids like it better when I take the black beans and I blend them up and I mix them in with the enchilada sauce, and I can add a lot of veggies that way, and adds good taste, but doesn't necessarily, make it to where they don't want to eat it. And then you're going to add a little bit of chicken broth. I ended up adding a little bit more than I normally do here. I underestimated how much chicken I had, but if you don't have as much other substance, then you may want to do a little bit less chicken broth, but up to a cup. And then add whatever seasonings you want and measure with your heart. I added garlic and oregano and cumin, and I love mixing those in here. They work really, really well. And then I added a little bit of pepper. Sometimes I add pepper, sometimes I don't. It just kind of depends on if I want a little bit of extra spice or if I don't. There's a whole lot of flexibility with this recipe, which I really like. If I'm out of something, I can just not use it, and it's fine. It doesn't change things a whole lot, which is nice. You can add some jalapenos in if you want some more spice. You can add green peppers in if you would like that. saute them first if you want them less crunchy. It's completely up to your preference. And then you're going to add a handful of cheese. This is another way you can, adjust your spiciness level. You can go for mozzarella if you want a little bit more mild. You can go for pepper jack if you want something that's a little spicier. Just add a handful in, or do a little bit more if you want more of a cheesy center, and mix it all together to make your filling. How you use that filling is 100% up to you. I tend to go for a casserole method because it's easier for my littles to eat, but if you want to go on full-on enchiladas, then that's fine. You would just take your tortillas, your corn tortillas, and put the mixture in it, roll it up, and then line your greased baking sheet, your baking pan, pour your sauce on top, pour your cheese on top, stick it in the oven, and go that way. I tend to prefer a more casserole look for it. It just seems to work a little bit easier for my family. So you're going to take a baking dish. This is a 9x13, but you can make it smaller or larger. You can make it thinner or thicker depending on how much of the mixture you have to put in the center. There's a lot of flexibility there. I use these gluten-free tortillas for corn tortillas. Not every corn tortilla is gluten-free, and these are. You're going to take it, you're going to line the bottom with these tortillas, and you're going to break some of them to fill in the gaps. You just want it to be a nice full bottom. It doesn't have to look pretty. And so they're nice and easy to break. You just fold them and kind of rip along the seam, and it comes apart really easily. And you line the bottom of your baking dish that way. Because they break so easily, I would say if you are going to make actual enchiladas, it's easier to heat these up in a skillet first so that they roll without breaking, because they don't really fill very well unless they're warm, but they don't warm quite as well in the microwave as they would on a skillet. So you would take a dry skillet and heat them up just for a little bit on each side until it's warm and moldable, and then you can fill them and roll them easily without having to worry about them breaking. I'd say the same thing for if you're using these for tacos. After you've got lined the bottom of your baking sheet, I like to sprinkle a little bit of cheese just along the bottom. That's just my preference. You don't have to do that. And that's partly, I think, because I don't put as much cheese in the mixture. But you can skip this step if you want to. I don't use a lot, but I line a little bit with my cheese, and then I'm going to come back in with my mixture, and I'm going to spread it evenly as well. Here's another area where if you've got a lot of filling, then the extra broth and the juice that you're going to have is going to be totally fine. It'll kind of soak into the mixture as you go. I didn't have quite as much filling this time as I normally do. I had used some of my chicken for something else, and so I had a little bit less than I normally go for. And so I ended up putting a little bit more of the broth in than I normally would, and as such, it was a little more soupy at the end, and that was fine. It tasted fine, and my kids liked it. But if you are less of a fan of that, then I would pour a little less of the chicken broth in, or a little bit more black beans or something else to kind of soak in a little bit more of the mixture. Once it's all spread evenly, then you're going to do another layer of your tortillas on top. If it's an area where you had broken ones before, maybe this time do the broken ones on the other side and do the full ones on that side. It depends on the size and the shape of your pan as to how and how big your tortillas are as to how you end up laying them out. Just play with it and figure out what works for you. But do another full layer on top and try to not leave any open places if you can help it. Because I usually go for the casserole method for this, I have no idea how many enchiladas will fit in a 9x13 baking dish. So if any of you try this recipe for actual enchiladas and you use a 9x13, let me know how many you can actually fit in the dish, because that would be useful information for later for how many you actually end up needing. After you've fully covered it, you're going to pour the rest of your enchilada sauce on top, or if you've only done a small amount, then maybe you only need half. You just kind of play it by ear. But you want the whole dish to be covered in your enchilada sauce. So spread it out as evenly as you can. It only needs to be a thin layer though, so you can do more or less depending on your mixture and how much you have and how big of a pan you used. And then you're going to finish by covering the whole rest of it in cheese. And this is another one where you measure with your heart. You only need a light sprinkling of cheese. That would be a little more of your classic enchiladas, but if you want to, you can cover the whole thing to where you don't see any enchilada sauce poking through at all. Depends on how much cheese you want. And again, mozzarella would be for like a milder version, or to cut maybe some of the spiciness from the enchilada sauce that you used. But you could also go for a pepper jack or a Monterey Jack or something like that, jalapeno, cheddar, and whatever you would like from a cheese standpoint. I tend to stick between pepper jack and mozzarella myself, but it's all about your preference. And this last part is purely optional. I have some little green onions that I like growing on in my kitchen, and so I clip off a little bit of those and I just add it as a garnish. It doesn't do much in the way of taste because I'm not adding it into the mixture, and I'm not adding very much, but my kids like the way that it looks and I think it's pretty. And so I just go for it. It, uses up a little bit of these. I have made it before where I've mixed green onions inside the mixture, and that was quite delightful. So go for that if that's your preference. But it's not something you have to buy extra for this. It's just using what you have on hand. Because assembly for this is really quick, you can start preheating your oven before you even start mixing your filling. If not, start now. Just go ahead and preheat your oven, and as you're getting everything finalized, you want to preheat to 375, and you're going to bake for about 20 minutes. If you want to go for 25, you can go for 25 depending on your oven, but 20 to 25 minutes at 375. Let it cool just a little before eating, and I recommend serving it with a healthy dose of sour cream. My kids prefer it that way as well. But it's easy, it's fast, it's cost efficient. You can use whatever you have and however much you have, and it's super delicious. All of my kids love it. I hope you do too.